Jim, I'm going to start with you, if I may. And clearly, you just made a statement there about what is our energy policy,
Right.
what is our foreign policy. So, what is it you would like to see? What's the reference to?
I don't disagree with Bill that we'll see exports from the U.S. We're already seeing exports from the U.S. We're seeing LPG move out. We're going to see some ethane exports. I think the nuance in the message from us has always been about the pace of this and the speed of this and the balance. A lot of what's happened in this country with energy competitiveness has driven the resurgence in manufacturing and the reshoring here. And so you have to keep that balance in mind. And when you look at what happened to our electricity costs that Bill showed in his slide, a lot of that's been driven by natural gas. So that energy competitiveness can go away pretty dramatically. And when you look at the impact it would have as an export into other countries, maybe Europe, for example, we know that it would probably land it in Europe only have an impact of about $1 a million BTU. That isn't going to solve Europe's energy competitiveness problem. There's a bigger issue at stake, and shutting down nuclear and not drilling and not fracking is going to make it very difficult for Europe to be electricity or energy competitive longer term. So I think you have to look back at the policies that were developed here in Texas that drove the competitiveness in America were around mineral rights, around drilling, and that's what created this whole infrastructure that makes us a fast mover and a first mover to market. Mexico, we heard today, has embraced an energy policy, so they've actually declared a change in energy policy that looks at how they're going to become more competitive. We need to continue to work on our energy policy to be more specific than just all of the above and how we're going to maintain this energy competitiveness, because this has always been one of America's key competitive advantages. And our point is we don't want to see this go to waste. And when we get into policy discussions, a lot of times I'll get into the debate of, well, free trade will take care of it and let the markets work it out. But in reality, we've let gas be exported before in the name of free trade, and we don't get free trade and levelized trade fields. And I think this is the big debate that's happening in Europe actually today as we speak, is if we are going to export this natural resource and this huge competitive advantage, what is the trade balance that we're going to get with our allies? And so that's the debate that we've been having. It isn't that we're against exports. It's being prudent about what we're trying to do and having a very clear policy, both energy policy and foreign policy, that we can support.
So, do you feel like Dow is a lone voice on this topic, or is there some alignment in the industry that we see?
No, I don't think we're a lone voice. I mean, there are many parties involved in the debate. We're certainly not conflicted. We're a consumer, so we're not conflicted in that sense of the debate. There are a lot of consumers that feel the same way we do. There are a lot of our customers that feel the same way we do. 8 out of 10 Americans today support the work that's going on with fracking and bringing that gas to the market. They see the impact from competitive advantage. They see the impact from jobs and reshoring. So one of the reasons we don't have more of an outcry today against fracking, I believe, is because everybody sees the risk reward of this and says we can manage it. Even our own governors across the country say, you know, we can manage this and we can handle the regulations at a state level, which is where they're probably best handled, and they're doing it. And so it's helping to develop a very robust underpinning for a very improved economy. And what we don't want to see is a return to a boom and bust cycle where we suddenly let everything go out the country, see a huge spike in the prices come back here, make us uncompetitive, and wind up back in a situation we were in a decade ago or 15 years ago that drove an entire generation of investment out of this country.
Okay, thanks. Dave, do you want to take some?
Thanks, Lynn. So I was going to ask Warren here. We're teaming up on you guys just to make it a little bit fairer. But yeah, it was interesting last slide there, with MDI facility in the little circle under construction. So congratulations
Thank
on
you.
that.
Thank you.
And I note in Mr. Valdez's speech, the feedstock availability in the Middle East, he's got it in that lower right-hand quadrant, and certainly we saw adding capacity. So with that preface, I think the question is, there's kind of a common perception that the Middle East is out of ethane, and that's really why it's being pushed this direction. But also hear reports of Saudi Aramco developing some unconventionals around of its own to push the gas liquid supply up. So can you comment on the light feedstock supply in Saudi going forward, and maybe broaden it to the Middle East in a little more general if you can as well?
Sure. Well, Saudi Arabia has now and will continue to have abundant supplies of hydrocarbon resources. There certainly is not the excess availability, the flaring that there was, 20, 30 years ago, and all of the those hydrocarbons have been gathered and put into petchem manufacture. But there are incremental supplies available, and we're flowing those into projects that provide good value to the kingdom and will allow the production of value-added products and creation of jobs within the kingdom.
Any comment from an unconventional standpoint?
Yeah, I think I'm not working in that area of the company, but it's been well publicized that we're active and in searching for unconventional reserves, and certainly Saudi Arabia is highly prospective for unconventional reserves. But even without unconventional, as I mentioned, we've been a reliable supplier for 80 years, and I expect we'll be a large, reliable supplier for at least another 80.
Fantastic. Lynn?
Yeah, sure. Daniel, over to, shifting the focus to Europe a little bit, but still on the subject of the gas. You talked about how you're converting the Dunkirk cracker and so on. So, from a European perspective, what's your view on bringing gas over to Europe? How much difference is it really going to make? And is that going to have any impact either way on restructuring that's needed in Europe?
I think it's, as I was trying to explain, it's part of the short-term solutions that we have. I mean, definitely I see rationalization, and I think imports of ethane is the short-term solution. And I think we, in parallel, need to work very hard on the more strategic one, which are the energy policy and the innovation. So, if I look at the advantage, I think even if the ethane will probably go up to 3-folds, to the current price, you still have advantages to take it in Europe if you have a cracker which is peripheral and well positioned. And if your investment is low, if you need to redo the cracker and you redo the furnaces in addition to the cryogenic and the storage, then it's another matter. So that's what I was trying to explain. It depends very much individually by that. The second part, the more strategic, Europe will have to come together with the energy policy, either embracing more relationship with Russia. This is something, because our cheap feedstock traditionally could have come from Russia, but they could come from Russia even more in future. Definitely going to the smart grid and the accumulation and the storage of energy, because the renewables that we unfortunately incentivize wrongly, they are always available when you don't need them. So you need to really innovate and go into the technology like many companies, including my group, is doing, about how to store this energy and make it available when you really need it, at the cost efficiency you need it. So these are the most strategic aspects that I think we should address in future. So short term, yes, import of ethane, if it is convenient for your asset. Longer term, energy.
Okay. All right, great.
Thanks.
So I've got one here for both Jim and Warren. In your presentations, you talked about the need for the human capital. I think that's element HU, isn't it, Jim? Right. And what specifically, what type of programs and resources do you think need to be put in place and driven forward to be able to attract the talent that you need in the case of the U.S. to replace retiring assets and to meet the growth, in the case of Saudi Aramco to to expand and get the resources to grow the market. Maybe Jim, you can go first.
Yeah, I think here we've seen a concerted effort by the industry across a number of fronts, beginning in the high schools with trying to get young high school students, maybe even as early as 8th grade, interested in going into science and technology and math, and getting them interested in our industry and getting them to have a feeling for what is the kind of work they might do in the chemical industry. So last night we had some discussions at dinner with some of our competitors like CP Chem and LyondellBasell and Exxon, who are working with JA down here to work on the Inspire program to really get the word out, even at that early age. We are seeing college enrollment in engineering up. I mean, small anecdotally, I grew up in Missouri, both at Columbia and the University of Missouri at Rolla. Engineering is up, 2,000 to 3,000 new undergrads in each of those programs. That's significant for the size of school that we're talking about. And I think we're seeing that across the country. We need that, but we also need skilled trades. And the community colleges here, working together with the community colleges has been huge. In all the regions, you see the community colleges stepping up their programs, but that requires input from the industry. We have to go to the community colleges and work together with them in terms of the type of training, the type of skills that we need, what are the type of systems, and what are the type of techniques that we need our employees to learn. And they've shown an ability to step up and do that. But it requires a lot of input from the companies to get the program and the curriculum right. So it's across a wide range of fronts. And lastly, I would say the big debate that's going on in the United States around immigration bill is also something that has to be addressed. And part of the immigration bill, and I think this is probably not the controversial part, is a foreign student who comes here and gets a college degree not being able to stay here and get a job is one part of the immigration bill. Another part of the immigration bill is the ability to bring in skilled workers for certain jobs to help us build the infrastructure that we need to get this done. Both of those are very valid and very, I think, noble causes for us to pursue, but what ends up happening with the immigration bill is it gets shot down because it gets loaded up with other things that nobody wants to support. We may have an opportunity this year, maybe the best opportunity, to see a good immigration bill pass the Congress, and that would be very helpful as well.
Thank you. Warren, you want to comment on from a Saudi perspective?
Okay, well, two things. First, just a note on the immigration issue. We, as I mentioned in my talk here, we have 100,000 Saudis studying outside of the kingdom, and we want all of them to come back, and I'm happy to say that they all want to come back and work and live in the kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And second thing, and this may surprise people, one of the things that we're working on, and really Saudi society is working on, is to improve the inclusiveness of women, gender equity. And we have a big program in place inside of Saudi Aramco to hire more women, young professionals, and they are dynamic, hardworking, they're great employees. So I think probably it's a global issue, but the idea of inclusiveness, because there's a lot of people out there, and historically not all of them have been given a chance. And so I think if we find a way to include more people, including women in the case of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, it's a huge potential.
Great.
Thanks. Pepe, over to the Mexico perspective on the subjects that we've just been talking about in terms of trade restrictions, well, not restrictions, but how do you feel from your point of view about exporting gas from the US, given the new situation you have in Mexico? And could you imagine ever there being petrochemical export restrictions? What's the Mexican view on its trade with the US?
I think we have become more free traders than even in the US. In Mexico, I would suspect that we, of course, welcome imports of natural gas from the US, and eventually, I believe that if it could go the other way around. I mean, if Mexico really takes advantage of all the resources, you could see Mexican gas exports coming into the U.S. as well. I mean, the pipeline we have today was originally built to export gas out of Mexico. We are now using to import, but I mean, the original intent was to export. So I believe between Mexico and the U.S. there shouldn't be any issue of exporting, importing. I mean, we're basically same market, free trade partners. I mean, I think that makes all the sense. The question regarding LNG exports, that's a more difficult question to answer. I think certainly the best thing can happen is to have a debate and look at the facts and based on that decide. And as Jim was saying, it's not against exports, it's just saying to do those in a balanced and measured way to avoid this volatility, excess volatility of the feedstocks.
Okay. Well, we have, again, an array of questions. We don't have an awful lot of time left, so I'll have to pick on one, and there is a few questions about Canada, actually, looking up to the northern part. So this is really for any of you to answer, but I guess Jim's in the obvious situation. But are we going to see investments in Canada, and what might be the scenario up there?
I think we will. I think we are, and I think we will. I think obviously there's some activity around LNG exports in Canada, given the proximity to the West Coast and the ability to get product out to Asia. I think there's some obvious advantage there. The other big debate is getting the product out of Canada through Keystone into the United States, which we have to resolve as well. But I think we are going to see investments there. Maybe not on the scale in petrochemicals that we're going to see in the Gulf Coast, maybe more upstream of that. And certainly we will see some petrochemical investment there. But it is coming.
Any other comments on that? No? Okay, great. Well, on that note, please join me in thanks very much to our panel.